Hijack is definitely the best action thriller drama I've ever done.
This train has been hijacked. If you do not do exactly what they say, then you will all die.
Season 2 is a crazy, layered chess game.
And if you listen to me, then we can end this.
It's time to take him out.
If you want something that's intense, go watch Hijack. You're gonna love it.
Let's send this train to the end of the line.
So in this episode, we're talking about all things Hijack Season 2. All episodes are now out on Apple TV. Not only is it a brilliant series on screen, but this show also did loads of stuff off screen, particularly in support of the crew. So if you are a member of crew working in the UK, take a look at this link to the Production Support Initiative. The link will be in the description box below. For some of the things that they talk about, that Karl talks about in particular, Jim also about the shadowing. So do check that out. Today's guest, Jim Field-Smith, is running the London Marathon on behalf of a charity called Harry's Pals. Now, that's a charity that supports families and parents who are receiving life-changing diagnoses. We've donated, and we'd encourage you to donate as well. If you enjoyed this talk, please chip in a few quid if you can. We're putting in the link to Jim's fundraising page below. We also mentioned the Mark Milsom Foundation within this talk, and we'll put in a link to that below. They do incredible work for safety on set, so make sure that you give them a follow on Instagram in the link below. Finally, if you want to see more conversations like this, hit subscribe, give this video a like, and we could come back and do some more. Enjoy the chat. We're here to talk about Hijack Season 2. It's the #1 show on Apple TV worldwide, with good reason. I'd like to welcome the co-creator, exec producer, and lead director, Jim Field-Smith, and the head of production for 6040 Films, Karl Liegis. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm a huge fan of Hijack. Congratulations on another brilliant, gripping series. My first question is, you've lived with the show for the last 2 years. The finale just came out last week. What's your overriding feeling having put the show out there?
It's nice of you to reduce it to 2 years, Matt. I think it's been more like 6, actually. I think we started making the show season 1 in 2000 and Karl might remember better than me, 21. I think
21, yeah.
Yeah, 2021. It's been a long journey. The show was actually greenlit while I was in pre-production on a different show, and which caused its own sort of challenges. But it's been a very, very long road. So my main feeling at the moment is one of, slightly sort of shell-shocked, sort of blinking in the daylight. And a lovely day like this, when it's sunny, it's nice to be out and about. But my main feeling is just sort of pride in the sort of many hundreds of people who worked on the show, and to have a show that's been a global hit in the way that it has been is, we're not always so lucky to make shows that get seen by so many people and also get loved by so many people. So that to me is my main feeling. It's just one of sort of pride in the hundreds and thousands of people that have worked on both seasons of the show, really.
Fantastic. And Karl, what's it like for you in terms of the length of time that you've been working on this as well?
I think there's it just grows. It sort of grows, and then it comes down. So you sort of go through a process. Yeah, it goes through a process where it sort of grows, and then you're sort of struggling to remember everyone's name on set, to then coming down to the very last bits where it's just like you see everyone and the amount of effort that every individual is putting in the process. And it's just like, when the machine's going, the amount of effort that everyone's putting in is like astronomical. And then when it's, 20 people left at the end, and everyone's powering towards the finish, it's just like, it's just like remarkable, really, to be in a situation where people have chosen to be part of the project to start with, and then have like committed so much of their time to making it the best version that it can be, and to do their job in the best possible way that they can.
So given the end result, if I take it all the way back to the beginning, Jim, from when you were starting to come up with the ideas for season 2, am I right in thinking season 1 was kind of intended originally to be self-contained, and then and then the door was left open to season 2. What were the ideas that you were coming up with for Sam to do next, and what if any ideas did you dismiss for season 2 before you landed on Berlin?
The thing with this show is it's not really people are delighting in asking me right now, oh, if there's a season 3, what's season 3 going to be? And what, is it going to be on a boat? Is it going to be on a bus? And it increasingly my sort of answer to that is it's sort of irrelevant. The precinct of the show is sort of irrelevant. It's that's where a lot of the fun in the execution is, and of course it can support the storytelling, and it can kind of provide a kind of allegory or a metaphor for the storytelling you're trying to tell with the character. And I can talk about that in a second in terms of the choice of the U-Bahn for season 2. But really, to bring a show back, you've got to think, well, why? Not just why for the character, not just why, oh, it was a big hit show, let's bring it back. When Apple asked us to do more of the show, season 1 hadn't even come out yet. And we were investigating doing more of this show before season 1 had come out yet. So full credit to Apple for sort of seeing something in the show and realizing that there was more to be had than as you said, what was originally intended to just be a limited series. And so we had a much more finite ending planned for season 1, and suddenly we get this phone call saying, like, what if the ending of season 1 wasn't quite so finite, which was the first clue that they wanted more. I suppose for me to come back and to do more, I had to think, why? Like I said, why would we do more? And therefore it comes about, you start thinking about the character and what reasons does that character have for coming back, and what unfinished business does that character have, and then you start to think about what weren't we able to explore in season 1. It's a real-time show, so that for all of the great things that brought to the show, it means you can't explore some things as fully as you might be able to in another type of show. So coming back for a second season meant we could explore a bit more of the depth and the anguish and the torment in the character, which myself and Idris were both very keen to do. And that then, I suppose, led us to, I was thinking in terms of opposites. So I was like, season 1 is up in the air, 35,000 feet, blue skies, it's jet travel, it's aspirational, it's sort of digital show. It's air traffic control is very digital. There's a lot of like communications with different devices and stuff, and I was like, I kind of want to do the opposite of that, just for my own sanity, if nothing else. So I started thinking about, like, well, what is the opposite of being up in a plane? And immediately I said I wanted to set season 2 on an underground train, which kind of made everybody slightly fall off their chairs. Because of course, everyone goes, oh, why don't we do it on a boat? Or why don't we do it, not in a confined space? And sort of part of my job on any show as a kind of creative leader is to kind of dig in a little bit and say, well, yeah, I know it would be easier or more fun to do X, but what's right from a sort of storytelling perspective? And then selfishly, what do I want to do? I've got to spend 2 years making this thing, and I've got to have fresh creative energy every single day and feel energized to make the show. So the underground really hit me very early on, and I sort of stuck with it, and everyone got behind it in a very, I was very flattered that everyone kind of got behind it and then got on board with it. And Berlin came about because we wanted him to be in a sort of alien environment. We didn't want him to be... We talked about London for a while, doing the London Underground. There's 2 problems with that. TfL are the worst organisation on the planet to deal with. And secondly, I didn't want to do like the fake London Underground, which is what we would have ended up having to do. I think anybody who works in production knows that shooting in London is hard enough, and it's very gratifying in lots of ways, but also kind of tough to deal with a lot of the publicly owned organisations, the government organisations. So, and I've dealt with them before. And, quite rightly, their main fear is that they don't want to disrupt Londoners. They want Londoners to be able to go about their daily lives without having like, oh, this tube station's shut. You're trying to shift 10 million people around the city every day. So we sort of moved off London, and we were thinking of putting him in an alien environment. And the list of places becomes quite short quite quickly, because you need a major metropolitan city with a giant subway system. We can't just do it in a city that has a couple of lines. It needed to be a major city, and so really there aren't that many cities with giant subway systems. And Berlin jumped out at us because there's a lot of English spoken there. It's a very cosmopolitan city, multilingual city. And then with my purely directing hat on, I really loved the kind of brutalist analog environment. And I grew up in Berlin, and I was living there in the late 80s when the wall came down. And I have this sort of very vivid memory of the yellow trains cutting through the city. I've worn my yellow sweatshirt today in honor of that. I have this sort of vivid memory of that visual, and that really stuck with me. And the more we looked into Berlin, the more we all got excited about it as a location. And it was such a treat to go back and shoot there, having sort of grown up in the city. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, well, when you say analog version, you literally got all the characters chucking their phones out of the window.
Yeah, I mean, look, the classic problem in any contemporary drama series is mobile phones. Absolute nightmare. It's the first thing you talk about in the writers' room. It's like, how are we going to deal with the mobile phone issue? Because it's the death of drama, basically. Like, everyone can talk to each other, text each other. It's like, it's not interesting on camera. I hate phone calls. I hate shooting phone calls and text messages. It's the worst. You speak to any director, they'll say the same thing. They're just sort of unbearable. And everyone's constantly trying to find a new way to do it. So one of the benefits of sticking the show underground and it being a hijacking is you can get rid of phones pretty quickly. And we sort of decided very early on, Sam should definitely not have a phone. And that solves a lot of problems straight away, dramatically. If he doesn't have a phone, the show just becomes 1,000 times more interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And so when Karl, when Jim's sort of revealing the story and the ideas to you, talk us through that process from your perspective as a head of production. So you're hearing early doors. We're in Berlin. We're on a train. We've got a large cast. What goes through your mind, and what are you working on at that point?
I think even before that, I'm phoning TFL saying, I'm really sorry about that angry phone call that you just got from Jim saying that the worst company in the world to work with, saying, we don't think you are, but we totally appreciate that there's a large population who you're trying to service. But before that, it's like feasibility studies on countries. It's like doing the research and finding out which countries, as Jim said, has the large infrastructures of undergrounds, and then speaking to service companies in those countries and saying, what are the possibilities? Has this been done before? And then sort of you just start whittling things down from there. And then the scripts come, and you're sort of trying to keep up to date with the scripts. And then once we had landed on Berlin, it was finding service company in Berlin to work with, who could speak confidently about working with the BVG previously, which is what Turbine did. And then we were out there basically on the ground in Berlin with the execs and with Alex from the development team, and just sort of while the script process was starting to bubble, being in the environment where we were going to set it, and then Jim and those guys looking at how essentially we would stitch it together and what stations would work and which ones had story elements that we could tap into. And then we're into the conversation about where we're gonna film it, how much are we gonna film in Berlin, how much we're gonna film in London, and then you're into the crewing up, and fortunately we had a number of key collaborators who Jim had worked with before and who'd been part of season one, who were very interested and available to come back for the projects. That was like DP, members of the camera team, AD team, editor, sound team, the makeup team. It was all like there was an infrastructure there that we could build around to start with. So then you start bringing those people into the tent as well. And then the next step is the production designer and working out the SFX rig and sort of the VP elements of it. And those are the sort of next stages in the larger production questions, if you like, that are going to impact everything within the show.
So this is give us an overview of the shoot then, in terms of what was the length of it, what was the size of the crew, and what's the ratio between the studio and location work.
So we did 136 days of main unit shooting, principal photography, and then we had some aerial units in Scotland, and even after we'd finished shooting, we were throwing drones up in the air in Berlin because it started snowing. So it was like capturing the snow in the lands, the trains in the landscape, and then we had 15 days shooting in Berlin. And then some of those were double banking days. So Jim was on one unit and Sean, our set and book director, was on the second unit. And then there was, in the UK, it was about 80% across the three stages in the studio and about 20% location, I would say. Yeah.
And so why did you choose to shoot the interior sequences, or build that train set in London? Was it a financial thing? And what was behind all that split?
On the creative side, it was that we, filming on trains is a nightmare, and when you've got a show that's predominantly based on a train, straight away that you're going to need to build that or own it in some way, and not, we knew we would film on we knew we wanted to film on the real train network. We knew we needed to find a city and an organisation that would allow us to do that. And that's Berlin. That's where Berlin really came to the fore. They were sensational, and the access we got was just unreal. And I don't know of another city where we would have got that. I've shot sequences on trains before, and very aware of how unforgiving it is as a production environment. And so we knew straight away we were going to build it, and then therefore that then sort of unlocks a sort of series of financial and logistical conversations about, like, well, where are we going to build it, and how are we going to build it? Are we going to basically like buy an old train and refurbish it and sort of customize it, which is one route we looked down, or are we going to build it? And actually, the decision to build it was, I think we realized that the reality of buying a scrap train, even if we could have done that, which it was proving incredibly hard to do so, and we realized that actually the over under of it all, it was going to be better to actually build it, and build it in a sustainable and recyclable way as well, which we're very proud of. But we needed to have full control over that set. So ironically, we built a 1-to-1 perfect replica of a train, to the point where people from Berlin came and stood on our set and said, "Oh, you've brought a train from Berlin, that's what you've done." And we were like, no, this is built from scratch. And full credit to Dom Roberts, our production designer, and his incredible art department, and our incredible SFX team, who figured out how to mount that whole set on hydraulic rigs and so on. And so you've got to find a facility that can house that. We're very lucky that Apple has arrangements with a number of studios around London, and we sort of looked at the ones that were available to us, and Wolf Studios in East London sort of had the right number of stages for the right period of time and the right kind of logistics on site for us, and so that's where we ended up.
So it's on hydraulics, and you've got like a virtual production sort of frame behind it. Are there any sort of panels or breakaways for camera angles, or were you just in the environment?
I'm the world's most annoying person like that, because my whole, the moment you build it, everyone goes, "Oh, great! Well, we're building it. That means we can like take walls out and have ceilings that fly out, and the whole side of the train can come off." And I, as I did with season 1, I said I don't want to be able to fly anything. I don't want to be able to fly it. In terms of the set, I don't want anything to be able to break away. It's got to feel like a 360. It's got to be a 300. It's got to feel like a 360-degree environment, and for that to work in its truest sense, it's got to be a 360-degree environment. When you're shooting every single day, almost every single scene on a quote unquote moving train, that illusion has to work day 1, minute 1, strip 1, call sheet 1. You have to walk onto that set, and it has to be working, and it has to work every single day for, as Karl says, the best part of 136 days of shooting. And so to do that, it's got to be built and realized as a 360-degree environment. And that was our whole vision from the start of it, was I want to be able to stand on the set with the camera, and I want to be able to swing the camera in any direction, up, down, left, right. I want to be able to walk through the carriage. I want to walk through the carriage into the driver's cab, and I want the whole environment outside to be moving. I want the set itself to be moving. I don't want the actors to have to sell any of the illusion of being on a moving train. I want them to just be able to just be in the scene. Because like I said, it's not one scene. If it was one scene, you'd kind of cheat it and you'd go, well, okay, we'll do a bit of rocking around and we'll get the actors to sell some of the movement and so on. It's like, that can't happen. And so, completely sort of watertight set in that sense. And one of our rules on the show is that the camera can't go anywhere where the camera can go in real life. So, even to the point where when we're shooting, when we're looking into the train and it's moving, one of our rules was that the camera would have to be mounted, even though we're on a soundstage, the camera would have to be mounted in a way that it would be mounted in real life. So for example, if you're shooting a scene on a train, on a real train, you're using sucker mounts and exterior mounts and grip tricks to kind of attach the camera to the side of the train, right? We were doing the exact same thing. Even though we could easily have put it on a dolly or whatever on the floor, I was like, no, it's got to be mounted to the train, because that's how you do it in real life, and that's how you get shots that you could only do in real life, and that's what adds to the kind of the illusion and the reality that you're doing it for real. Because the temptation, of course, is you're in a soundstage, so anything's possible. Let's get a techno crane in and push up and down the length of the train, and let's be outside, like looking in through the windows. It's like, well, no, because where would you be in real life if that train was doing 70 kilometers an hour down the tunnel? Where's that camera operator standing? He's standing on a platform next to the train. So we initiated those rules, and it was something we did on season 1, and we carried it through to season 2.
It just doesn't make anybody's life easy, but it makes it like much more authentic. And the to speak to some other bits within it as well, as like the continuity of working between Berlin and London. First of all, we're like saying, right, this is our world, this is our set, it's this big. And so you've got, not only is the art department sort of building with all of that in mind, and that's why the collaborations between everyone and the communication between everyone is like so critical, because every step of the way everyone needs to be in lockstep and aware of exactly what's happening. So you've got the art department trying to match Berlin and our sets at the same time, and then they've got the set builds at the same time, as well as the considerations that are happening for camera, who've got the BP wall outside and the video wall down the side, and then Ed's trying to match light for Berlin and London as well. And then you've got, the confined spaces that he's managing again within that. And then you've got the SFX department who are layered on top of that with the movement of the train. And then you've got the snow in Berlin. And then you've got the ADs who've got the background that you're trying to, keep continuity across the whole show between the UK and Berlin, and hair and makeup and costume. They've got the real-time continuity that's going on, and the script supervisor with the 2 languages. It's like, it's sort of on every level, it is like, it's the most complex it could be for a department almost because of the way that it was constructed. But that's, that's where, when everyone brings their A game, it's totally necessary in these sort of, with this storyline and with this, with the setup that we had.
The thing about
I spoke with a few members of crew on the show, and they told me some things. Even though it's a very, very complicated shoot, and you were sort of pushing the boundaries on lots of different things, they said some very nice things. Jim set the tone, quick with feedback, knew what he wanted, and rapped on time, which is like music to the ears of a lot of crew, of like just how to handle a big long shoot like that. Are you aware, when you're directing, Jim, and you've got the story to think about, you've got the cast to think about, are you aware of how what you do sets the tone for the rest of the crew working on the set?
Yeah, 100%. And I like my sets to be friendly, creative, collaborative spaces. I don't like them to be I think sometimes there's an awful tendency, and it's totally understandable, because our business works on time and money, and there's an awful tendency in our business to sort of for productions to feel a bit like the army, and it's like, do this, do that, go, and everything's like, you know, you're like deploying into a war zone, and it's really tough to marry that up with creativity. Like those two things are basically anathema to each other. Now, you know, yeah, time is money, but usually when sets are like that, when sets are volatile or there is a angry voice at the top of the pyramid, it's usually because that person or those people haven't done the homework and they are scrabbling and they're panicking themselves and they're under pressure themselves, you know. And you are under a lot of pressure as a sort of creative leader. I do feel a lot of pressure to deliver, particularly on a second season of a show that's been a huge hit. But at the end of the day, what we try and do is do all the work up front to make the, and this is, for example, why we built the train. One thing we didn't really touch on, which is a really valid thing to bring up, is it's got to be a pleasant environment for people to work in. You know, that is your office for 9 months of the year. You're in a train, and like, you know, people need to eat lunch, people need to go to the loo, people need to have breaks, people need to step out and get some vitamin D, you know. So we did build the set partly with that in mind as well. Like, how do we get people on and off? How do we make this a pleasant environment for the actors and for the crew and for, you know, HODs and people that are kind of coming and going from that environment a lot. So I do try and make sure the floor, whether we're on the train or whether we're in a, you know, location or whether we're in another sound stage, I do try and make sure it's a quiet and sort of studious environment as opposed to a go, 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 go environment. That's something I've tried to instigate for a long time. You know, I came up from doing comedy, and I think some of it comes from that. You know, when you're shooting comedy shows, you just can't have a set that's like that because you just can't make a funny show basically. And so, you know, I try and have a little bit of levity on set, and I try and make sure that everyone knows that at the end of the day, you're making a piece of entertainment, and no one should go home feeling hurt or anxious or exhausted. I mean, no one should go home feeling like over-exhausted from a day on a film set. You know, we sometimes have to pretend, actors have to pretend to be exhausted, and sometimes the work is demanding, but nobody should be going home every single night and thinking, I am exhausted, I'm emotionally drained. If you're in that position, then something's wrong, and I'm sure Karl will agree with me. Like, people should be going home feeling energized to come back in the next day and add more to the process the next day.
Well, on them, I think that some of the things, some of the crew that I've spoken with told me about some of these initiatives that you went to on this production, which is more, and it's gone further and farther than I think any production that I've ever heard of doing. Karl, can you give us a quick rundown as just to some of the initiatives that you did to support crew on this production?
Yeah, and just to add to Jim's point, I think that like the reality of crew going home exhausted, like it's sort of where it is. It's what we're trying to work backwards from, right? And if we're aware of it and acknowledge it, then it's like, okay, well, what can we do to reduce that in some way? We can't always avoid it, but we're always looking to take lessons, I guess, from our own experiences in the industry, and now apply it to the productions that we move forward on. But in terms of initiatives and I guess more widely like production support, we from the outset when we're interviewing, we speak to the HODs about the fact that the culture that we want to nurture across the 5 areas of access, career development, training, diversity, equity and inclusion, sustainability, and then welfare and culture. And then that sort of sets the tone in that meeting so that everyone knows that if they are then going to be part of the project, that's there. It's not like anyone who comes on board is then surprised by what we're trying to do. And it should be that they're encouraged by it, by our commitments, and then also with the commitments that we ask from them with regards to the training. So we have 7 screen schools training modules that we asked everyone to complete prior to filming, and then we provided leadership management training, the health and safety training, and then there was also the Mark Milson health and safety module that we asked some of the other roles on the production who might not necessarily require the full health and safety work. But then we have, in terms of personnel, we've got an access coordinator, which is now more and more prevalent in the industry, but still not there enough in terms of representation, and making our sets and the industry more accessible and inclusive. We have a training manager and a training coordinator on the project. So that's like supporting the trainees and the work experience placements, which are paid work experience placements, but also the mid-level crew in them being able to like progress their career and their own development. So we're sort of, the idea is to not treat it like it's a freelance production. As Jim said, given it's like a 9-month period, we're sort of over this place where we should be looking at crew as being, they come in, they get utilized, and then they leave, and then they're on the next thing. So we need to look at the period of time that they're with us, support them with that process, knowing that more often than not, they find themselves in a situation coming towards the end of the job where they're looking for the next one. So, or there is a job opportunity comes in, which may mean that they don't have that break in between the productions. So we put breaks in between our hiatuses, which are full media blackouts. Sometimes it doesn't work, and we've definitely applied lessons from the previous productions, and now we do it where we've got a media blackout, and then we have a prep period following that as well, so that the crew don't get anxious leading up to the media blackout. We had paid director and producer shadowing placements. We had mentoring. We had, as I said, the managed work experience placements that was worked in conjunction with Barton and Dagenham and Film London and Screen Skills and local youth workers. We ran a program called Post Futures, which was in collaboration with a government boot camp, a government skills boot camp, and we've sort of tapped into that because the post-production side of the industry is often sort of forgotten about because there's not many freelancers working in that space. So we've sort of hacked into that. So we get a 12-week paid placement for somebody to go into that environment. We had access audits carried out. We had a sustainability team. We had the people and cultural HR training and HR support on the project. Soulless Mind for the crew. We had a mental health platform, yoga. And then we did anonymous questionnaires throughout with an organization called Talent Trust. And then we also had a suggestions box. And again, with that one, we sort of learned that the survey fatigue is real. So we've sort of taken a lesson from that on the other ones. And then exit interviews were available. I'm sure other stuff as well, which I'm sure if other people were on the call, they'd be able to give more.
Extensive list, a pretty like a lot of initiatives, a lot of great things. You mentioned the paid director placement program on this one, Jim. That would have been something you would probably had to been quite closely involved with yourself. Can you describe how that was for you, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that was important to us was when you advertise any director shadowing scheme, you always get hundreds and hundreds. We had well over 300 people applied for it. I put a thing out on social media and it was like flooded, like absolutely flooded. And it's understandable because, there are a lot of people trying to break into the industry and that feels like a very appealing thing to do. But for us, what we were trying to do very specifically was find directors that are struggling to break through a glass ceiling into HETV. So, what we hear a lot is that you find there are directors, and just to give you an example of one of the directors that shadowed on this season was Ash Gadvi, who has directed multiple episodes of Corrie and Emmerdale, and he has struggled to break through into HETV because although he has directed multiple episodes of mainstream TV programs, broadcast TV programs, he has been struggling to get the, commissioners and execs to place their trust in him because he hasn't directed an episode of HETV. And it's like, well, someone has to hire you for you to be able to get that experience. And so what we tried to do was to take directors like Ash, who they're not standing on set going like, oh my God, this is all completely new to me. They know the world they're stepping into, and we as you said, it's a paid program and they're expected to show up as if they work on the show. So we pick specific days that feel like good days for them to be there, but they are expected to be there from call till wrap. And we involve them, it's not just a question of them following me around or standing on set, like I said, sort of sponging it all in. A lot of it was like, come and sit in this pre-production meeting for this sequence that we're going to be shooting in 3 months' time. Then come and be on set on the day that we're actually shooting that sequence, and then come again 3 months later in post when I'm cutting that sequence, and then come again 2 months later when we're in the VFX review session for that sequence. So they're getting like a whole picture, not just of the creative, but of the a little bit of the kind of the financial and the troubleshooting and the collaboration and how you interact with departments, what it sounds like being in my shoes. What does it sound and feel like being a director on an HGTV show? What do the meetings feel like? Who do you interact with? How do I deal with problems, etc.? And hopefully you didn't pick up too many bad habits from me, but that was what we were really trying to do, is trying to help the sort of next generation of HGTV directors break through that kind of glass ceiling that unfortunately sort of understandably exists.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's the idea that it's a constructed shadowing placement. So the training team were really heavily involved in this. Like there was Jim, there was Sean, there was the training team, there was Annabelle, Jim's assistant, who were like really focused on how do we make this really meaningful. Like not just something that, someone can put on their CV, or that they, in 5 years' time, they can apply it to whatever they're doing. It's like, how can we really move them forward now within what we're doing? And we've adopted the model on other shows, and on those productions we've had the shadowing placements who've been given second unit director opportunities and credits on the show. So it actually is something that is a tangible progression for them in their career.
It's brilliant to hear. It's really good to know that all those opportunities and pathways and that support is in place for the crew, which is, I just think, fantastic. And I hope it's replicated beyond. I'm sure it'll be replicated on all of your shows as you go forward. And I just wanted to ask you, before we open up, I'm going to do some quick questions, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. There is, before I get onto that though, there is a pathway to series 3, but does it have to be a series? Where do you see Sam going next?
I'll sort of, to take it back to something I said earlier, like the precinct is irrelevant. It's fun. It's fun to think of places you could put him. The reality is you could put him in a phone box, if the writing is good enough and the reason for him to be in that phone box is good enough, and if that phone box presents enough story opportunity. I've sort of seemed to have made done a bit of a run of kind of shows set in confined spaces, and I'm a little bit of a contrarian. So when someone says, "Well, you can't possibly do that," I immediately go, "Okay, I'm doing that." When people say to me, "Oh, well, you're probably just going to get set season 3 on a boat, aren't you?" And I sort of say, "Well, maybe. Like, it could be on a boat." I've shot on boats; they're a nightmare. But then shooting on underground trains is a nightmare as well, and we figured that out. You could put him in the back of you could put him in the basket of a Lime bike. It sort of doesn't matter to a certain extent. And I'm being a little bit flippant, but for us to want to come back, for Apple to want to bring the show back, regardless of whether the show is successful or not, it's in sort of audience terms, for us all to want to bring it back. That's me, Idris, 60/40, Apple. It's all got to be about why are we bringing him back? Do we all have forget the audience for a second? Do we all have an appetite to bring him back? And are we going to be able to sustain that? These shows are incredibly hard to make. I cannot state that. I love making this show, but it's incredibly hard to make, and I love making it, and I wouldn't do anything else. But to be able to do it and to want to do it every single day, you've got to have a really strong, creative at the core of it, and without that, I don't think any of us would do it.
Well, so we'll watch this space for whatever comes next, and if you find that right, Paul,
Yeah, I mean, also,
the whole
I've
team.
literally only just finished making season 2. It should be said, we delivered the show right before Christmas, like literally the week before Christmas. We had teams finishing up the localization across Christmas and the New Year. We premiered the show in the second week of January in New York. I've been doing, press and publicity stuff up until, including today. So. The idea, even the concept of doing another season is so like far from my brain right now. That's why I'm being a little bit cagey.
What will you do to have a palate cleanse between the jobs, between like parking this one and thinking fresh?
I'm trying to just power down a little bit. I'm trying to sort of reset. I think that's really important for anybody on this call. I would say we're all so, and I include myself in this, we're all so nervous about what the next thing is. For freelancers, particularly who, I was very lucky through COVID, and that just, well, partly because of this show, but also the 2 or 3 shows I was doing before and the way they lined up. COVID, I was very, very fortunate in that COVID didn't affect me in the way that it affected much of our industry, and I feel incredibly blessed to have been in that position. But I have friends who, were almost destroyed by that, by that period. And we've seen the ups and downs of the industry over the last 3 or 4 years, and rightfully everyone, when they're working on a job, is constantly worrying about what the next thing is going to be, because we've all got lives, we've all got to pay bills, we've all got families to support, and so on. Like I said, I include myself in that. I'm as nervous as anyone of what the next thing. You have to force yourself to stop properly, and to particularly if you're in a creative role, I would say, to be able to stop being immersed in something for a second and open your eyes back up to what's going on in the rest of the world, and find yourself kind of re-energized and re-inspired as to what your next thing can be. That's personally what I'm doing right now. I'm working on several things, but the main thing I'm working on is kind of having my eyes out to the world and sort of breathing in some oxygen and just giving myself that chance to refresh.
And running, lots of running.
Yeah, lots of running as well. Yeah.
That's true. You haven't asked us to do this, Jim, but I will say that you're running the London Marathon for charity. Yes. We are going to drop the link to Harry's Pals, which is a charity that supports families and parents receiving life-changing diagnosis. So if you want to make a donation towards that on behalf of Jim coming forward for this chat, please chip in a £5 or a £10. We've donated. The link is going to be below for that one. So
thank you so much for doing that, Matt. I really appreciate that. They're a tiny charity, so anything you can give is really makes a huge difference. So thank you.
And you're really close to your target as well. So
yeah, we're trying to raise at least 5,000. And I think we're just a few pounds off that. But we'll keep going. Like we'll take anything you can spare.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, the link for that will be in the chat box, and we'll drop it in the video box as well if you're watching this. I'm going to come to some really quick fire questions, and then we're going to take some audience questions as well. Can you give us 3, if you've got them, of your favourite film or TV shows?
My favourite film is an Australian film called The Castle, which is a comedy, which is something I think about a lot. It's a very funny film. I urge you to watch it. It's about a guy who refuses to give up his home, which is trying to be compulsorily purchased by sort of evil developers who are growing an airport, and he lives on the edge of an airport. But it's about family, and it's about what lengths you'd go to for your family. My favourite TV show, it's a particularly hard one to answer, but a show that I do come back to a lot is The West Wing. I've been thinking about that show a lot and developing some things at the moment that aren't a million miles away from that kind of world. And I was very fortunate to meet Tommy Schlamme, who directed a lot of that show, and who kind of is the sort of godfather of the walk and talk. I was able to say to him, West Wing was my film school, which was like a really great moment for me. But Karl's going to have some way cleverer choices than that.
I don't know cleverer, but yeah, I mean, I would say film-wise, Black Cat, White Cat, probably Emir Costa Rica's film, which is incredible for anybody who hasn't seen that. Two Lane Blacktop, American road movie, and then Point Break. That would be my three on the original Point Break. But the remake was there was something in that as well. And then TV wise, Sopranos definitely, and then I guess prior to that, Homicide: Life on the Street, and then after that, The Wire, and then This Is England, which I was very fortunate to work on. But yeah, having sort of Shane Meadows been my education on cinema and TV, that would be my 3 or 4, whatever that number is.
And then, can you give us who do you think will be the next big thing?
Oh, do you know what? I think what's exciting at the moment is there are people coming out of the woodwork from all over the place. You know, I think the industry used to be so. We've got a long way to go, but the industry used to be incredibly predictable and dominated by sort of usual suspects. And I think what's happening is commissioners are taking bigger chances on writers and directors than they ever were. I think risk taking in storytelling is an all-time high. I think we've seen some incredibly challenging stories being brought to the screen over the last couple of years. So sort of afraid to answer the question really, because I think the answer truthfully is like it could come from anywhere, and I would urge anybody that's on this call or knows someone who's sort of trying to break into it is to keep going and keep telling stories and keep trying to tell stories, because there is a huge need for a huge appetite for these stories, and there's the more outlets than there ever were, and they are all commissioning more than they ever were. So in terms of supply and demand, the market is rich for it. It feels tough to everybody all the time. I know it does. I'm in the same boat. We're all in the same boat ultimately. But I think to answer your question, I don't know. I don't know who the next big thing is, because that's the joy of seeing something that feels completely new and fresh. And I watched Sirat yesterday. I'm just like, what is this? And that continues to be the joy of seeing stuff and being able to go and see stuff, whether it's on TV or in the cinema.
I highly recommend Sirat. Yeah, I can't agree more. It blew me away when I saw that. So it's such a good show. I think it's out of cinemas now. So, Karl, any shouts from you for the next big thing?
I don't think I have anything like that. I think it would be the same sentiment as Jim. Really, is that in terms of crew, it's like there's lots of people who I came up with who are now progressing into those roles, which is like such a joy to see. There's obviously Screen Skills Leaders of Tomorrow that are advocating for new crew as well. It's like we are an industry that are, I guess, more conscious than ever about diversifying and increasing the representation in the industry, and that is there is so much possibility that exists within that. That as we've seen, there are incredible stories and experiences and insights that create a better industry for both behind and in front of the camera.
Okay, all right. Well, look, we'll come. Thank you for both of those. We'll come to some of the questions from the audience. Please just put your questions into the chat box. The first one I'm going to come to is from Giselle, who wants to know whether you had the complete script before you began shooting, or because did you leave any room for improvisation on the day?
There is an element of improvisation in everything I do, but the scripts are definitely locked down before we shoot them. It's the sort of the block scripts are locked down going into each block. Essentially, that's not to say we don't rewrite constantly, because we are constantly rewriting. This show sort of necessitates that. It's a very twisty show. It's a very plot-heavy show, and it eats a lot. I always say it eats a lot of story, and so we do constantly find ourselves having to kind of remodel it live. But we don't enter into anything without having a sort of fully approved and shootable script for that, whilst also leaving ourselves open to being able to change stuff.
And was there any, because I always think your background in comedy is perfect for a show like Hijack, because it's misdirection, timing, it's hiding things in plain sight. Do you ever think that you are in a unique position because of your comedy background with the Dutch Elm Conservatoire?
You know, people always kind of roll their eyes when I say this, but I think comedy is way harder to do than drama. Way harder to do. Way harder. You know, I have the utmost respect for anybody that works in comedy. It is an incredibly exposing job. If something is not funny, you know it's not funny straight away. I think a lot of drama can get away with being quite mid. You cannot have a mid, well, you can have a mid comedy, but a mid comedy exposes itself way faster than a mid drama. And so I have the utmost respect for comedy writers, comedy actors, comedy directors, comedy editors, particularly. You know, these are really high-end skills, and I think comedies get overlooked wildly by critics and awards. It's a much harder art form to make, and like I said, you're taking it's a much more vertiginous high wire act than it is making a drama. And you'd think it would be the other way around, but it's not. Yeah, you know, I learned a lot of things making comedy, and it has definitely informed what I do in the dramatic space. And also I try to make sure that even the most serious shows that I make have some levity in them, because I feel like that's life, you know. It's not, I don't want everything I make to be sort of po-faced, and there needs to be moments of levity in everything.
Greg's asking, how close was the finished version close to what you shot? Was there anything that you had to drop, any subplots or anything like that had to be dropped for time or for rhythm?
Well, it's a real-time show, and actually, you know, it's actually quite hard to lose stuff. Surprisingly hard to cut stuff. I mean, we can compress stuff and we can expand stuff, but there were no storylines wholesale that went. You know, everything that a version of everything is in there. There are some storylines that had to get sort of filleted slightly, but by and large, it's one of the kind of constraints, or one of the sort of difficulties of the real-time format is you have to make your bed and get in it, you know, and there's not much you can do. You know, not on a regular drama, you can go like, oh, you know, let's shift that and let's play with the structure and let's move all this around. You sort of can't really do that. You can do it to a certain extent, but it's quite limiting. So you have to be quite confident in what your story is and where it's going.
Well, Wayne's asked, you felt the pressure of delivering Series 2 to be on at least the par with Series 1. Were you ever doubtful that if you wanted to do it at all?
Yes, we all were. You know, but you know, when you make season 1 of anything, well, season 1 of Hijack was a limited series. We didn't think it wasn't season 1; it was Hijack. We were making Hijack, and you're just trying to make this thing, and you don't know what the tone of the thing you're making is until you start making it. You have an idea, but of course that shifts across all the different phases of, you know, prep and you know, development, prep, production, post-production, marketing, release. Like, these are all the show takes on different, you know, a different sort of identity, and it's only once you sort of step back from the end of it, and then the sort of final part of that is the audience decide. The audience decide what the show is to a certain extent. So in a way, making season 1 is quite freeing, because you're just making the thing. It's actually, in a way, and you know, bands talk about this all the time, so a second album problem. You come back to make season 2. On the one hand, you're thinking, well, we know what the show is now, so that's easy. We know this character. We all know each other. We know the sort of strengths and weaknesses of the show. But you're also trying to make sure it's fresh. You're trying to make sure it sort of honours the original thing that it's following up, whilst also being different. And of course, yeah, you've got the weight of expectation of like, this did really well, and so now we're going to make something, and everyone's going to be sitting there with their arms folded, going like, "All right, bring that back, are you? Let's see how you get on." So yeah, there is a huge amount of pressure, but you know, I think we all wanted to jump off that cliff together and do it, and it seems to have worked out. So we're relieved.
Good. And Karl, would you be up for going for it again?
I mean, listen, I'm here to support the production, so that whatever happens next, I think it's about learning from and utilizing everything that happened before, both in terms of story and in terms of the culture that we nurtured on the show. And then if we're given the opportunity to do anything, I'm always very grateful for that. And so for me, it's the application of models and frameworks and creating a demonstration to the industry of what something can be like. And obviously, we always want it to be the best version of itself. So yeah, if we could do something and do it well, then I'm always going to be up for that. And yeah.
Good. Well, listen, our time is up, unbelievably. That's a very, very fast hour. And I'm incredibly grateful for both of you for joining us, as I'm sure everybody is going to say in the chat now. Give you all thanks for coming on and speaking with us today. If you haven't seen the finale, I recommend you go and check it out. And we'll put all the links into the chat. We'll send you the video when it's all finished. And I'd like to thank Jim and Karl for joining us for this brilliant chat today. Thank you so much for joining us, being so generous with your time and wisdom. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the invite.
Good luck, everybody.